most dangerous psychological predators do not announce themselves. While we are conditioned to look for the loud, boastful ego, that cultural expectation leaves us blind to a much more destructive variant. Covert or vulnerable narcissism replaces overt grandiosity with subtle, indirect manipulation. These individuals appear self-effacing while harbor the same demand for admiration as their extroverted counterparts. The DSM-5, shown here, categorizes narcissistic personality disorder as a systemic clinical pathology. It is a cluster B disorder characterized by intense emotional instability and a documented deficit in empathy. This condition is driven by an inflated but unstable self-image. To manage deep-seated shame, the narcissist requires a constant stream of external validation, a resource known as narcissistic supply. Because the covert variant presents as quiet or fragile, they evade standard psychological threat detection systems. Their apparent weakness provides the mechanism to bypass our internal defenses. Their daily presentation is that of the misunderstood genius. They appear introverted and chronically unappreciated, masking a deep sense of entitlement behind a facade of quiet anxiety. They secure attention by deploying the Sob Story. By systematically positioning themselves as perpetual victims of circumstance, they gain emotional support while avoiding any personal accountability. A high-reputation environment, like the bureaucratic landscape of 1960s Washington, D.C., provides the perfect cover. In cultures focused on discretion, these subtle emotional tactics flourish undetected. This projected humility triggers a caretaking response in the target. The narcissist utilizes this instinct to gain a foothold in the target's life. This vulnerability functions as a tactical infiltration method, engineered to extract emotional and psychological resources from high-empathy individuals. Narcissists do not prey on the weak. They systematically target high-yield emotional batteries. They seek out fixers and empaths, individuals who prioritize the needs of others over their own. This dynamic often attracts the egoist, named after the Greek myth seen here. Egoists have an aversion to being seen as special, making them compliant hosts for a narcissist's ego. The narcissist suffers an internal war between an actor of superiority and an actor of insecurity. They require an external host to regulate this conflict and prevent a total psychological collapse. The target's vital emotional energy is relentlessly siphoned into the narcissist's hollow core to stabilize a fractured ego. Narcissistic relationships function as parasitic symbioses, existing solely to stabilize their self-image through the extraction of external supply. This circular flowchart maps the predictable four-stage cycle of narcissistic abuse. First, idealization, or love bombing, secures the initial tether. Next, devaluation begins, utilizing passive aggression to create a loop of trauma and relief. Finally, the discard severs the connection once the target is emotionally drained. This cycle constructs a cage of cognitive dissonance. The target remains trapped in a state of perpetual confusion, attempting to placate a personality that cannot be satisfied. Defending against this pathology requires shifting from empathy to tactical detachment. The objective is to establish an internal locus of control that the narcissist cannot penetrate. The countermeasure is affective deprivation. To neutralize the parasite, you must systematically starve the narcissist of the emotional reactions they require to sustain their false persona. The gray rock method involves delivering short, neutral, and strictly fact-based responses. You purposefully become as emotionally uninteresting as a stone. Employing this psychological armor turns your energy to stone, forcing the parasitic tether to spark and completely detach. In this dynamic, standard communication is a vulnerability. Complete emotional unengagement is the only viable method for neutralizing a covert narcissist's ability to manipulate. This tactical sidebar outlines the protocol for verbal engagements, the No-J.A.D.E rule. It provides a framework for interacting without providing supply. J.A.D.E stands for justify, argue, defend, and explain. You must refuse to perform any of these four actions during a narcissistic confrontation. Engaging in these behaviors provides the narcissist with ammunition. They will use your explanations to distort facts and prolong the conflict for further emotional extraction. Absolute silence is devastating to a pathology that requires friction to validate itself. Without your defense, the narcissist has no mechanism to anchor their projections. Adhering to No-J.A.D.E effectively unplugs the machine. It removes the emotional interface, leaving the narcissist unable to extract the validation they crave. When effective deprivation succeeds, expect a chaotic escalation of hostile tactics known as the extinction burst. The predator reacts to the loss of supply. This burst involves smear campaigns, intense guilt-tripping, or sudden love bombing. These are desperate attempts to re-establish the emotional tether by any means available. Weathering this escalation requires radical acceptance, the clinical recognition that the narcissist's behavior is an unchangeable symptom of their disorder, not a reflection of your worth. The structural capacity for empathy is absent. External compassion cannot compensate for a biological and psychological deficit in personality formation. The narcissist's rage is empirical proof that the defense is working. Their escalation confirms that they can no longer access the emotional resources they once controlled. The ultimate operational goal is no contact. Severing the communication line permanently terminates the narcissist's access to their target's psychological supply. When shared legal ties exist, the yellow rock method is used. This is a strictly professional, polite, and neutral communication protocol focused only on logistical facts. High-conflict legal battles, such as the family court dynamics represented by this protest, often become a narcissist's final theater of control. They use institutional friction to prolong the dynamic. Repairing the cognitive dissonance requires a systematic return to empirical reality. Recovery centers on relearning to trust your own memory over the narcissist's projections. Implementing these protocols severs the supply chain. Mastery of these clinical boundaries terminates the cycle of dependency, returning the individual to their own internal perception of reality.